It was a piece of history being put back into action. Once at their headquarters, the real work began. To make the spiral stable, they built a wider wooden base for it, making its footprint bigger to keep it steady when the muddy mix started flowing. Then came the cleaning. 80 years of sitting around had left it caked with dirt and grime. Freddy and his partner Alex got to work on fixing it up. They needed the spiral slide to be as smooth as possible for it to work correctly. So, they began the boring process of cleaning and planning to recoat the surface. As they worked, they discovered a surprising fact. According to an old industry book, Alex found nearly 9,400 of these spirals were made, and the book claimed most were still being used. Freddy laughed, knowing that was highly unlikely in today's world of high-tech processes. You can't believe everything you read. But as he turned his attention to the pipes that redirect the gold, he hit a major problem. The main collection pipe was completely packed with old, hardened junk. Freddy grabbed a heavy hammer and started beating on the pipe, but the blockage wouldn't move. It was packed solid. They needed to see what was going on inside, so they prepared for a deep internal look at the pipe. Time was running out, and this unexpected problem was a huge setback. They had to get it cleared, and they had to do it fast. The success of the entire operation now depended on clearing this single, stubborn pipe. But the blockage was far worse than they could have ever imagined. Trial by super-hot fire. The internal look revealed a disaster. It wasn't just dirt and gravel clogging the pipe. The problem was the pipe itself. Decades ago, it had been lined with rubber to protect it from wear. But over 80 years, that rubber lining had rotted and collapsed inward, creating a thick, impossible-to-get-through plug. There was no way to drill it or force it out. With their deadline getting closer, Freddy knew they were out of time for a gentle solution. He had to do something extreme. He decided he was going to try and use superheat to clear the blockage out of there. It was a massive risk. He grabbed his oxygen acetylene torch, a special tool that could make incredible temperatures. He was about to apply heat, reaching over 5,700 degrees F to the antique cast iron pipe. One mistake, 1 second too long, and he could melt or crack the irreplaceable 80-year-old metal, destroying the spiral and their entire plan along with it. The team watched with held breath as Freddy fired up the torch. The roar filled the workshop. As the intense white-hot flame met the ancient metal, he carefully heated the outside of the pipe, hoping to burn up the rubber inside without damaging the iron. I haven't seen one speck of gold in it yet, which is a darn good sign. That means that sluice is working great. After a few tense moments, he shut off the torch and grabbed a heavy-hitting tool. He gave the pipe a few sharp taps. At first, nothing. Then he hit it again, harder. A puff of black smoke shot out of the end, followed by a chunk of burned, melted rubber. Holy cow, it was working. He hit it a few more times, and a waterfall of burnt junk poured out onto the floor. When they looked through the pipe, it was finally clean. It was a messy, risky fix that worked better than they ever expected. They had avoided a huge bullet, but now came the real test. Putting all the pieces together and seeing if this collection of new and ancient parts would actually find them more gold. The moment of truth had arrived. With the fixed-up spiral and the new pipe system fully installed, it was time to see if their wild plan would work. At the top of the mountain, Levi and Corey started feeding material into the jaw crusher. The crushed ore flowed into a slide, where two powerful shakers shook it down into the new 180-foot pipe. Down at level 2, the muddy mix of rock and water shot out the end of the pipe, and onto the new sluice box. Everything was running perfectly. The feed rate was incredible. A constant, steady flow of material that was more than they used to process in an entire day. The spiral is actually working really well. Freddy's actually been panning it as we've been running. He hasn't seen one color in this yet. As the system ran, Juan kept a close eye on the spiral separator. The muddy mix swirled down the iron slide, a mesmerizing black whirlpool. The design was working just as planned. The heavier material, hopefully containing gold, was sticking to the inside track. Meanwhile, Freddy was taking samples from the very end of the process, panning the leftovers, to see what, if anything, was being lost. After his third pan, he looked up with a huge grin. He hadn't seen a single speck of gold. This was a fantastic sign. It meant the new sluice and the 80-year-old spiral were working in perfect harmony, catching all the gold before it could escape. The system was a roaring success. The sluice was catching the vast majority of the bigger pieces, and the spiral was grabbing the fine gold that followed. Every part of their radical plan was working flawlessly. The amount of material they were moving was staggering compared to Before, they had gone from painfully hauling a few buckets down a treacherous path to sending a river of ore straight to a highly efficient recovery plant. For the first time in a long time, on the island of Echo, the air wasn't filled with hopelessness, but with the thrilling hum of progress and the promise of a massive payday. But the true measure of their success would only be revealed when they did their first cleanup. After running the new system for just a short while, it was time for the first cleanup. The difference was stunning. Before, a cleanup meant finding a few tiny, lonely specks of gold in the pan. Now, when Juan tilted the pan, there was a thick, heavy streak of beautiful yellow gold at the bottom. Well, what we came up with, as far as cost goes, we're thinking it's going to be around 7,000 of materials. It was a weighable amount, something they hadn't seen from a single run before. The sheer volume of material they processed was the key. Levi and Corey used to struggle to run 150 pounds of ore in the short test run. They had already processed over 500 pounds, and Juan was convinced they could push it even harder, maybe even double that amount. They carefully collected the gold and placed it on the scale for the moment of truth. The numbers climbed 0.02 ounces, 0.005. It settled at 0.07 ounces. To an outsider, it might not sound like a fortune, but for Levi and Corey, it was everything. That 0.007 ounces, worth about $160, was roughly 50 times the amount of gold they had recovered in their previous runs. It was absolute proof that the system worked. Freddy and Juan did the math. If they ran the plant for a standard 6-day week, that result would equal 1.68 ounces of gold, worth a staggering $3,864. They rescued the mine and created a fortune. But was it right to use such aggressive methods on the historic island? Like and subscribe to find out what happens next. For the work, we're thinking about 4 ounces when the season ends. You don't need to pay it now, but when the season ends, that won't be a problem. If we make more gold, and we can get the gold, we can make it work. Okay, yeah, I think we can. We have to. How do you save a dream that's dying? For miners, Levi and Corey, hope was almost gone. Their mining spot on a hidden island barely made enough gold to pay for gas. But when Freddy and Juan showed up, they brought a crazy idea. For a price of 4 ounces of gold, they would build a system so good, it could make 50 times more gold. The island where dreams go to die. The island was a place where dreams came to die, hidden away off the coast of Washington state. Local people called it the Island of Echoes, because the only things that seemed to last were stories about people failing. For many years, gold hunters had been drawn in by rumors of thick gold veins, only to be crushed by the island's mean tricks. Weird magnetic fields often messed up modern electronics, and the weather could change from sunny to crazy windy storms in just minutes. The ground itself seemed to fight back, holding onto its treasures with a stubborn grip. Levi and Corey's mine was the latest business about to fall into this familiar pit. Here's one of our earthquake sensors. So these are quiet earthquake tools. So yeah, it doesn't bother anything. Yeah. Perfect. All we have to do is stick these in the ground, and then wait 20 minutes. Go to the next one. I want to wait 20 minutes, and go ahead. Their way of working was backbreaking and heartbreakingly slow. They would chip away at the gold-filled quartz vein deep inside the mountain on level 3. Then they had to carry every single bucket of rock down a dangerous winding path to their processing machine on level 2. The road was a nightmare, slippery with mud, and likely to have rock slides. After all that work, their homemade system was so bad, they were losing most of the tiny gold pieces. They were processing maybe 150 pounds of material on a good day, and the gold they found was barely a sprinkle of dust in the bottom of a pan. To be honest, they were just days away from giving up. Another pair of dreamers, about to be eaten by the island's legend. Their hope was disappearing as fast as sunlight in the island's deep shadowy valleys. Watching you guys feed it at the end. There, I'm like, I really think we can put more through that hammer mill. You might be able to get that done in an hour. The whole operation was losing money and spirit. And as the season went on, the pressure got worse, with each day that passed without finding gold. They knew that without a miracle, their claim would become just one more empty scar on the landscape. A quiet reminder of the island's unforgiving nature. What they didn't know was that their last desperate call for help was about to be answered. But the solution would make them take the biggest risk of their lives. When Freddy and Juan stepped onto the claim, they could feel the heavy air of hopelessness. It was a familiar feeling, but the problems here were unique. They saw the dangerous road, the bad mill, and the tiny amount of gold that represented weeks of hard work. After a long look at the struggling operation, they came back to Levi and Corey with a plan that was nothing short of amazing. It was a three-part attack, designed to completely change the game. First, they suggested a simple, but brilliant solution to the transportation problem. Put a sluice box in place of the table, and then out of the end goes into a catch pan. Pump that material up to the top of the spiral. Cut the heavy stuff out of the spiral. Forget the risky road. They would install a 180-foot-long 4-inch pipe that would run straight down the mountainside, sending rock from the crusher on level 3 directly to the mill below. This would make the whole process smooth right away. Next, Juan would build a brand new custom-made sluice box designed to be much better at catching the free gold that was currently washing away. This alone would make a huge difference. But the final piece of the plan was the real game changer to get the high volume they needed. Freddy explained that they would bring in a specialist. This expert in high-energy rock breaking would teach them how to use a controlled rock breaking system to get ore out of the vein way faster than their small rototool ever could. To complete the system, they would add a spiral separator, an old piece of equipment that would process the leftover material and pull out every last piece of gold. The price for this change was steep for a failing mine. It would cost around $7,000 in materials, and for their work. Freddy and Juan wanted 4 ounces of gold at the end of the season. It was a huge gamble. But for a 50 times increase in gold, it was a risk Levi and Corey knew they had to take. This pipe's packed up with stuff. I've been beating on it with a hammer, and it won't work. We'll give it a deep look inside, and a throat check here, and try to get all of it. This wasn't just about making the mine profitable. It was about beating the island's curse once and for all. Their entire future was riding on this one radical high-stakes plan. Yet, as the miners agreed to the deal, a strange low humming sound seemed to come from the very rock around them. A sound no one had ever heard before. With the deal made, Juan set off on an important mission. Part of their plan relied on a piece of technology that was almost an antique. Something most modern miners had never even seen. 20 miles from the claim, back on the mainland in Washington state, Juan followed a lead for a Humphrey spiral separator invented by a man named Ira B. Humphrey, way back in 1943. These spirals were everywhere on washing plants in the 40s and 50s. You see, the device is amazing in its simplicity. It uses nothing but gravity and water to do its job. Pay dirt, mixed with water, gets pumped to the top of a giant corkscrew-like slide. As the muddy mix swirls its way down, a simple law of physics takes over. The spinning motion pushes the lighter sand and waste material to the outer edge of the spiral, while the much heavier gold sticks to the inside track. Along this inner track are small openings that catch the gold and suck it away for collection. Freddy and Juan were betting on this 80-year-old design because of the island's notorious electronic problems. While newer, complicated machines might break, this purely mechanical system was safe. It was a piece of history they hoped to bring back to life. To be honest, they had never used one before, but they believed it was the secret weapon they needed to dramatically increase the mine's output. Without processing more material, Levi and Corey would never make it. Juan finally found them. 3 of the ancient cast iron spirals standing together like monuments to an old era of mining. They were heavy, covered in decades of dirt, but Juan saw their potential. He knew that beneath the rust and grime was a machine that had likely collected a fortune in gold over its long life. He chose the best one of the bunch. A perfect piece of history that was about to get a second chance. He had no idea, however, that the spiral was hiding a serious problem that could ruin their entire project before it even began. Big difference was, before you guys ran 150 pounds, maybe not even that. We ran probably 500 pounds. Yep. Honestly, watching it run, I think we can actually turn that up a little more. I think so too. Getting the 80-year-old spiral back to the claim was an adventure by itself. The cast iron monster was incredibly heavy, and the team had to carefully strap the antique piece down to make sure they didn't lose it on the bumpy ride. It was more than just equipment.